This is Edinburgh's High Street, and when this video comes out, it'll be day 2 of the 2022 Edinburgh Fringe Festival, the biggest performing arts festival in the world. That's the box office of what I'm assured sells more tickets than any other world event, apart from 2 things: the Olympics and the Football World Cup. And this is on every year. In fact, this is the 75th year of the Edinburgh Fringe. But lots of people in Edinburgh will choose to leave town. Is the Edinburgh Fringe Scottish? If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you a story. Now, if you're Scottish, just stop to think how lucky you are. On other continents, I've heard local performers say how their dream was to come to perform at Edinburgh. For me, it's a £9 train journey. But there are lots of Scots who have never bothered. Tell me in the comment section if you've ever been to or performed in an Edinburgh Fringe show. If not, then in the next 20 minutes, I hope to give you a very brief history of Edinburgh Fringe, make you proud that it happens in our country, and suggest some things to do and see in 2022. I suppose the Edinburgh Fringe was started by an Austrian artist called Adolf Hitler. Like many Fringe shows, he was controversial and created a bit of a media storm. Oh, and he destroyed half of Europe along the way. A fellow Austrian called Rudolf Bing, exiled by Adolf's shenanigans, realised that there would be limited opportunities for artistic festivals in the rubble of post-war Europe. In an attempt at renewal, he thought up an international festival of music and drama in Britain, which hadn't faced quite the same level of destruction. Ah, so the Edinburgh Fringe is Austrian then? Not quite. Bing first put forward the idea of a lunch meeting in a restaurant in Hanover Square in London. Ah, so the Edinburgh Fringe is a London festival. Looking for a city that could absorb 50 to 150,000 people over 3 weeks, Bing considered several English cities. But what he really needed was one big enough with the right quality and quantity of theatres in a place picturesque enough that people would actually want to come. And Edinburgh, with its castle, brought back memories of Salzburg. So, with £10,000 some toff called Lord Rosebery had won on a horse, matched funding from Edinburgh Town Council, who'd presumably bet on the same horse, and some money bunged in by the Arts Council of Great Britain, the festival commenced in 1947. But that wasn't the Fringe. I read somewhere that from the beginning, the festival had a broad coverage, a highlight of the first season being concerts given by the Vienna Philharmonic reunited with their erstwhile conductor, Bruno Walter. So no Proclaimers then? Now that sounds way too posh to be Scottish, but that's where we get to the Fringe. You see, whilst the organisers invited and curated a festival based on what they saw as appropriate taste and culture, 8 theatre companies turned up uninvited. These gatecrashers found their own venues and just put on shows. Now that sounds way more Scottish. One of the groups put on the morality play Everyman across the Firth of Forth in Fife in Dunfermline Abbey, and a journalist commented that it was a shame that the show was so far out on the fringe of the festival, and that small effing fringe over time would become a big FU to the established order. Fringe was genuinely broad, open, and most important, non-curated. If you're watching this, then you can perform in next year's Fringe in a programme that includes theatre, comedy, dance, physical theatre, circus, cabaret, children's shows, musicals, opera, music, spoken word, exhibitions and events. How Scottish is it? I suppose that depends how many fringe goers and performers pronounce the business name that's coming up properly. There used to be a newsagent called Mingus's. It was bought over by W.H. Smith, but back in the day, they were the first to compile a list of other events in their festival brochure. Then, in 1954, the performing companies themselves funded their own additional entertainments brochure. There had been massive growth in the 7 years since this upstart festival up and started, and there were now 12 companies on the fringe of the International Festival. These days, we take a central booking system for granted when it's open. In fact, if I remember rightly, you have to sell at least 25% of your tickets through the fringe. But it took 8 years before folks of the 50s saw any centralised ticketing, organised by students from Edinburgh University. Back in the 50s, some of the Edinburgh students were even Scottish. By the end of the 50s, there were 19 performing companies. The fringe was a thing. And in 1959, they formed a Festival Fringe Society. It's kind of a membership organisation that elect board members to run the fringe. By that time, there was even a proper fringe guide. No, a fringe guide like this, though much smaller. By the end of the 60s, things had grown more. You see, by sharing a venue, instead of one evening performance, there could be several shows a day, sharing venue costs. In fact, if we divide the venues with partitions, we could put on more than one show at a time and save even more money. Now that does sound Scottish. Many a meikle makes a muckle. As the 70s started, the Fringe Society thought that they better employ a part-time administrator. Turns out, they had to make him full-time. It was him that came up with the idea of numbering the venues and having a map in that brochure that used to see folk clutching as they ran from venue to venue trying to fit in as many shows as they could. That was before apps were invented. Have they got an app this year? Inventing things is definitely Scottish. By 1981, there were almost 500 performing companies, but only 2 full-time fringe employees. That's mental! But things were about to get more mental because we were entering the era of the super venue. Here in George Street are the assembly rooms mid-assembly. What started in that beautiful Georgian building will now spread temporary mobile units all along the street. William Burdett Coutts. That sounds proper posh. Scottish. Technically Zimbabwean. As was dates redeem. That's a whole different history. The point is that he established a big venue with multiple performance spaces that would come to dominate the fringe. Not church halls and ragtag spaces, but properly produced, staged, lighted and sounded. I know they're not all real words. The higher rents to pay for them were real. How can smaller production companies compete? It was almost like the fringe itself was becoming tiered and curated. Now, I said the fringe was open and anyone can put on a show, and that's true. But getting into a venue like the assembly rooms involves some of the very curated hurdles that the fringe had been set up to avoid. Rock and roll, punk rock, alternative comedy. It seems that whenever there's a flower and a free expression, there's somebody to control, sanitise, and often profit. In 1981, a water company changed the game. Perrier were genius at marketing. Not only had they persuaded people to buy water out of a bottle rather than the free stuff in the taps, they now sponsored a competition for the top comedy show of the fringe. The Perrier Award sponsorship was so successful that even after they stopped sponsoring it, having been embarrassed by carcinogenic benzenes found in the bottles of their water, No matter who sponsored it, people still called it the Perrier. That must have been hard to swallow. So now a French/Swiss water company was the most powerful brand behind an international festival in Scotland, started by an Austrian and increasingly controlled by London. I once overheard two comedy industry types in the Pleasance courtyard saying, every year all the promoters come up from London, the acts come up from London, the PR, reviewers, management. I don't know why we don't just hold this in London. But remember, summer in Edinburgh also meant the original international festival, and now a film festival, a book festival, and the military tattoo. Edinburgh is the festival city. But the Fringe, which had started as theatre, was becoming more and more about London comedy. But let's face it, what's easier to fund? Travel to Edinburgh and a month's rent for a multicast play and its crew, director, set design, the cost of advertising to compete with hundreds of other shows for an audience? Or one comic standing talking into a microphone? Thus brought 2005, a momentous year for Edinburgh Fringe, because here in the Beehive in the Grassmarket, a young 41-year-old comic called Bruce Fummey performed his first ever Fringe show. That's right, I got to join the ranks of those budding performers with more confidence than talent, who would largely go unnoticed and forgotten for the next 20 years. Maybe 10. But I was an artist. Fringe festivals have now sprouted up all over the world, in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, America and more. I've performed at some of them. From 2005 through to the pandemic, I brought shows here that were a combination of Scottish history and crass jokes. I was unashamedly Scottish and Ghanaian. This year, I'm not bringing a show at the Fringe. I'm far too busy making YouTube videos of Scottish history and crass jokes. Is YouTube the new Fringe? An uncurated, open platform where you can put on a performance anytime you want. Let's face it, more people will probably watch this video than saw me performing all my Fringe shows put together. Now, don't get me wrong, ignoring a troll in the comment section doesn't come close to the buzz of spontaneously and quick-wittedly telling a heckler in a live room to fuck off. No amount of thumbs up, for which I'm grateful, and feel free to like the video, but they're not quite the same as instantaneous, involuntary laughter in one of these rooms upstairs. A couple of years after I started here came the explosion of the free Fringe. A few years earlier, a slightly eccentric character called Peter Buckley Hill started the idea that instead of huge fees for highly produced venues, a pub like the Beehive that had a couple of spare rooms upstairs could let the rooms free to a daily calendar of shows that needed little production. Their beer sales would increase, the performers would get the rooms for free, the audiences get free entry and make a donation on the way out. Bingo! The free Fringe changed the game. It might be one of the reasons that in 2008, comedy took over as the dominant art form at Fringe. The increasing curation by venues in this uncurated festival was diminished. Now, not all free shows were quality, but even some big acts in big rooms bought into the free Fringe system. Costly, high-produced shows meant most performers lost money anyway. Better to lose rental costs, allow free entry, perform to full rooms, and accept pounds flung in a bucket. I say pounds. I've actually stood here as folk come out and drop euros and dollars into my bucket. I once got a condom, Mrs. Robinson. When I mentioned this in the next show, I got a whole bucket of condoms. Have you ever tried going shopping and saying to the girl behind the counter, you know what, I don't have any money for this, but I've got a condom. Don't. Again, this free fringe was a bit like YouTube. You work hard hoping to educate and entertain, folk get to watch it for free, and at the end, they can click the button below the video and donate with a super thanks, or click the link in the description and buy me a coffee. I'm not sure how you're going to get the condoms to me. And to be honest, these days, the coffee will keep me up more than... forget it. I'm just saying that in 2008, when the Fringe's computerised ticketing system failed, money in a bucket for a free show wasn't such a bad idea after all. Of the 4 super venues, 2 were London-based and 2 were Edinburgh-based. They got together to call themselves the Comedy Festival. That meant that we had the international festival it started with, the Fringe Festival, the Comedy Festival, the Free Festival, the Free Fringe that came about when Alex Petty and Peter Buckley-Hill of the Free Fringe fell out, necessitating 2 behemoths of the free model. And of course, you also had the People's Fringe of Judea, who were just behind the front of the People's Fringe of Judea. You had the Fringe of the Popular People of Judea. What else? You had the Popular People at the front of the Judean Fringe. They were sold out, you couldn't get a ticket for them. You had the front of the Fringe of the Popular People in Judea. They tried to cut back to the front of the People of Judea's Fringe, but 3 involuntary circumcisions led to the venue being closed. Oh. The Beehive here now plays host to the Scottish Comedy Festival. That was set up because in a festival held in Scotland's capital, some people felt that the Scots are often squeezed out. The Scottish Comedy Festival is run by a Scouser and a Kiwi, and you can't get more Scottish than that. If you're coming to the Fringe in 2022, then go and see some of the great Scottish acts like Gus Limburn, Ross Leslie, Gary Little, Ray Bradshaw, Paul McDaniel, who might technically be Irish, but we don't know for sure because he's from the north and it's all a bit confused up there. Anyway, he now lives in Glasgow where there are none of those kind of problems. And of course, in my opinion, the king of Scottish comedy at 7 p.m, Mr. Raymond Mearns. You won't find funnier or more Scottish than him. In the Scottish Comedy Festival, you'll also find some Irish, who are pretty much Scottish, a Canadian, same thing, a Geordie, close enough, and my favourite Cockney with a Scottish attitude, Eddie Brimson, and a wee Chinese lassie. The Scottish Comedy Festival is more international than you might think. But let me take you to a show that I'm definitely going to see in the Fringe. The Underbelly is another one of those big super venues that I talked about. This London-based operations probably had more criticism than most for its corporate sellout, loss of contact with the whole ethos of the Fringe thing. But artists want to perform, and corporates, well, they do what they do. What I'm going to see here is a play called Beg For Me by Rosa Maria Alexander, about how a young man's radicalisation leads him to the steps of the US Capitol, if you remember that furor. It's also delving into the mindset of toxic male behaviour with dark consequences. So, a view on recent historic events that may challenge me as a male and require me to think. I like that kind of Fringe show. I don't want a show that finishes when I walk out of the venue. I want one that continues with conversation between the people that I went with, or self-reflection if I went on my own. More value for money. If I'm being honest, I'm also going because Rosa's from my hometown of Perth and her dad's my pal. And I remember before she was a playwright, when she was a kid at school. The point is, she's Scottish. Well, her dad, my pal, is actually a Greek Cypriot from London. But from a babe in arms, Rosa's from Perth, now living in London. And in some ways, I think her play sums up a lot about the Fringe and indeed Edinburgh itself. It's rooted in Scotland, but it's also international, and I hope outward looking and challenging as well as proud. And its very existence, it poses the complexities and challenges of freedom in a commercial world and trying to remain true to yourself. Whether or not the Fringe is Scottish, there's something here for everyone. If you'd like to know more about Edinburgh's impact on the ideas of the modern world, then there's a video coming up on screen now. In the meantime, Fummey and Dochas can be Lamali. Cherry and Draston.